Hi, everybody. Again, my name is Professor Atalano, and we are going to be going over your resource evaluation assignment today. And so for Module 1, we're again focusing on our resource evaluation. So when you're doing research, we want to make sure that we're looking at the best quality sources for whatever topic or class or subject you might be studying. So evaluating our resources is going to be your most important step other than finding the information, which we'll talk about later on. So for this assignment, we are basically going to be using the same rubric and information that we're going to be using for your resource evaluation project. The project is worth 100 points, and it is the first project for this semester that we're doing. And so let's go ahead and get started. So we do have the information here in Canvas. So this information, for example, it starts off talking about when your project is due and what we're going to be doing for this assignment itself. So if we scroll down, this is the exact same information, the exact same protocol that we're going to be using for the project. So for each resource that you use, and we're going to be going over one resource in this video, and then the other two are going to be up for you guys to evaluate. So for each one of these, we're going to be using a scale of 1 to 5, with 5 being the most appropriate and 1 being least appropriate. We're going to be rating each of our resources on the 5 criteria listed here: authorship, relevance, documentation, currency, and publication type. And for each of these resources, we're going to have a list of overall comments. So for all of these, we are going to be judging our 3 resources, and here they are. We're going to be doing this first one together with the link. We're going to be looking at this specific topic. So this topic is really important because it's exactly how we're going to relate relevance to it. So let's start with authorship. So under authorship, it lists a few different things that we can think about. But basically what we're looking into is whether or not our author is up to speed. So who are they and what qualifications do they have? Has the author written any books or articles about the same subject? Therefore, are they an expert in the field? Does the author have advanced degrees? So for example, if a librarian is writing about library topics, they most likely, maybe, should have a degree in a master's in library and information science. If it's somebody who has a degree in astrophysics, are they an expert to be talking about library stuff? Maybe not. Or vice versa, if they're a librarian, should they be talking about astrophysics? Would that make them an expert? And another thing that we can look for is whether the author is affiliated with the university, or do they have experience in research itself. So a lot of the different sources that you might be coming up with might be written in academic journals, scholarly materials. We'll be talking about those types of sources in a later module, but usually if it's an academic source, the author might very well be a professor or have a doctorate from a specific place, which might tell you that they are indeed an expert. So the author of our piece, his name is Steve Hartman, and if we didn't know who he was, the first thing that we could do, for example, is to Google him. So we'll see right off the bat that Steve Hartman is pretty popular. He has his own Wikipedia article, and he is, in fact, a broadcast journalist. So no, he's not an academic. He's not an expert in the field of cat libraries, but he is, if that were a thing, but he is a reputable journalist. And he works for CBS Evening News, and he has been shown on other areas that would make him seem pretty notable in his field. Now, does that make him an expert in cat libraries or even animal therapy animals and how they, working with college students? Probably not. But we know, for example, CBS News is a reputable news outlet, and Steve Hartman himself is rather notable. So we might rate this maybe a 3 or 4 on authorship. So definitely not a 5, which would be amazing, the most notable that we could ever look for. But he wouldn't be, for example, just some guy with a blog. We know, for example, that he does have qualifications in journalism, and he does have experience on reporting on all types of different subjects. So I think anything from 3 or 4, probably 3, would be a pretty good rating for that. So let's go to our document. And so this is just the sort of beginning of it. And remember that we want to make sure that we have a section for overall comments. So we've got what source is listed here. We want to make sure that we write that out. And then for authorship, let's say 3. And then we want to say the author. You want to give some sort of reasoning. So the author, Steve Hartman, a broadcast journalist with many years of experience. And then you could write, for example, a couple of the other topics he's covered. He has a Wikipedia article. You can sort of take it whichever way you want. But you definitely want to say he's not an expert in the field of therapy, animals, or college stress, but CBS News is a reputable news outlet. See, that's good enough for me. So our next one is relevance. And under relevance, we say, for example, is the focus clearly stated? So is our relevance stated? Does a major portion of the content focus on the topic, or is it merely mentioned in passing? So again, we want to take relevance and look at our given topic. So our topic is about therapy animals and how it can help students calm them, especially during stressful times like finals, etc. And what about events in libraries? So how libraries host events with therapy animals to calm students down. So if you go back to our video and our article on the cat library, so we are talking about a area where they do check out cats to relieve stress, but even though it is called a kitten or cat library, it's actually housed in a office building, the Donna Ana County office building in New Mexico. So we're not talking an actual library. So I would say that doesn't make it as relevant, but we are talking about animals releasing stress. It says even here, it definitely releases stress, says Angela. How can it not when you have a little fuzzy thing that you could take back to your office? So there's a clue there. So our topic is about college students and relieving their stress, whereas the people who would check out the cats from this little library are office workers. So when we put it against our topic, we could say that is somewhat relevant, but definitely not as relevant as some other sources might be. So the whole idea with relevance and evaluating for relevance is if you're writing a paper on something, would you use a source that isn't specifically on your topic? You might, but I'm sure that there are much better sources out there on this topic. So let's go back to our document here. So with relevance, again, it's 1 to 5. So I think we could probably give this a 2 or a 3. So if we were to say 2, we could, for example, say that while the video and article discuss relieving stress with the help of animals. It does not cover libraries, sorry, even academic libraries providing stress relief for college students. The video and article are focused on relieving the stress, you get to see all my typos, relieving the stress of office workers. All right, we might even give it lower or higher depending on how we can spin it, but it's up to you to provide your justification. So like I said, I think a 2 or a 3 might work. I'm leaning more towards 2 because again, it doesn't address our target audience, which is college students, and it's also not an academic library. It's an office building that checks out kittens. And the kittens are not therapy animals. They're actually just cute little kittens, which is still good and still relieves stress, but that's why I'm leaning towards a 2. And again, it's up to you to make these decisions. So documentation. So how well does an author document sources? So for example, we can look to see if there are citations or if they make mentions of other research works, other people who have done research on a similar topic. And sources might also be data. So it could be, for example, how like percentage of people or interviews. And we also want to make sure that the sources themselves are relevant to the topic and are sufficiently recent. So if we go back to our video and our little article, there are actually no citations, but we do have interviews with people. For example, the kitten librarian herself, Becky, she talks about how many people check things out and how they feel. So there is a reference to other sources, even though they're not academic, even though they're not stated specifically in a formatted citation, it still could be considered a source. So basically like a news source or a source of a sound bite, that counts. So thinking about documentation, again, we have a scale of 1 to 5. So for our documentation, we might say, for example, I might give this a 3. So we could say, for example, that even though there are no citations in the article or video, there is reference made to sources through interviews. And you might say a little bit more about that. For example, the fact that the broadcaster does interview specific people who work with or use the kitten library. They might be considered a source of themselves. There isn't any sort of data that's noted in it, but it's not exactly terrible. It's nothing at all. I'd give that a 1, but it's also not a 5. But again, maybe a scale of 2 to 3, you can see. All right. So our next one is currency, and this one's really simple. So how recently was the information published or updated, and does that matter for this topic? So with our topic, we are wondering about therapy animals and how they can help relieve stress of college students. This article and video was published in June 5th, 2015, so it's a couple years old. But for our topic, it doesn't necessarily need to be completely up to date. Subjects in which you might want something really recent would be, for example, technology, science. We don't want something that's 10 or 15 years old when it's talking about the internet, for example, because that changes forever, always and often. But if you're doing a research topic on a historical source, then obviously you don't want something really recent. If you're looking for primary resources, then you could definitely use an older source. Currency does depend on your topic, definitely. So for our topic and currency, I would say this could probably get a 5. a 4 if you're really picky, but we could say, for example, article and video are from 2015, which is fairly recent for this topic. And that would be more than enough information, and I would definitely agree. But again, it does depend on your topic. So publication type. This one can be a little tricky because we are talking about whether or not a source is, the type of the source actually matters. So what is it? Is it scholarly? Is it from a periodical, like a magazine, a newspaper? Is it a book? Does that matter? So we have here, while academic research normally will be best developed using journal articles, articles from other types of publications could be useful depending on the topic. So again, we're going back to our topic. So remember, our topic is about academic libraries and how they can help relieve stress for students with therapy animals. So our publication type might matter because maybe we want to look at academic sources. Not always, though. So you have to look at the source itself. So this is a news report from CBS News, which means that it is not a scholarly source. It's actually a popular source. So we could, for example, say, and I would give this a 3 or a 4. Usually for an academic source on an academic topic, definitely want a 5. So for our publication type, we would say, I would give it a 3. And I would say that CBS News published the story and it is a popular source. And then you could go into detail to say that you would much rather have an academic source for this topic, but a 3 is perfectly acceptable. So remember that each of our resources require an overall comment. So would you use this resource in a paper on your assigned topic? And then we have to explain why or why not. So it is sort of a cumulative idea in which you look at the rankings that you've given so far. So we gave it a 3 in authorship, a 2 in relevance, 3 in documentation, 5 in currency, and 3 in publication. So overall, I might give it an overall ranking, let's say 3. So, and then our overall comment might be, for example, I would probably not use this resource for my topic because it is not very relevant. So you could go into more detail about why it's not relevant, but again, we kind of covered it up above. You could say that, well, I could probably use this resource as background information about how other things outside of academic libraries use animals, but again, it's not the therapy animals like our topic would. So honestly, if it's not very relevant, it's probably not going to be a very good source for you to use. So I hope this video has given you a good idea on how to complete your resource evaluation assignment. It should also be really helpful for when you begin your resource evaluation project, which is due in February. So if you have any questions at all, feel free to send me a message in Canvas or send me an email. I'll talk to you guys soon. Bye.